Hoop City, Paul Sir here with Josh Fenwick on this great Saturday morning. And one of the reasons that Saturday is a great day this year in the city of Edmonton is it's the start of the new CEBL season, the 8th rendition of the CEBL season. And I'd like to welcome to our program a guy that I have worked with for many, many years, doing the play-by-play with the Stingers. I won't be with the team this year, but I love to have Doug McLean in this morning to talk about the start of the Stinger season. Doug, how are you today? He's there now? Okay.
Now are we good? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Doug. How are you today? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. I'm excited about the CEBL season. I know there were a lot of changes in the management and the head office of the CEBL this year. There have been a lot of changes around the league, of course, but this is a new Stingers team, isn't it, Doug? Pretty much there are returners. Let's first talk about who's back from last year, and then we'll start talking about some of the new players that have been brought in.
Yeah, a handful of guys is back. Nick Hornsby, everyone will, Stinger fans will know him going into his fourth season with the team. Mason Borsey, who joined the team kind of early on in the season a year ago and jumped into the starting lineup. He'll be back. Tay Donald, a former U Sports player, now playing professionally, has played overseas, now back again with the Stingers. And then Aaron Rooms, who had another outstanding season with Toronto Metropolitan University in U Sports. He has graduated, now back with the Stingers again for this season. And then Mike Nuga as well with the club. Has been a couple times now with the Stingers. Joined again partway through last season, and he's back. Nuga and Hornsby will not be there today, will not be with the team quite yet. I know I heard you talking earlier about the WNBA and the CEBL being somewhat similar in that sense in terms of players wrapping up their pro seasons elsewhere and then jumping into these other leagues, and so that'll affect Nuga and Hornsby. But Borsey, Donald, and Rooms all back. Saw them at practice earlier this week, and they'll be in the lineup today.
When you were at practice, Doug, what did you see? What struck you about the composition of this new batch of players?
They're a little bigger. I think they've added a little bit more size throughout the lineup. Isaac Jack being the one player, 6'11", played under Dave Smart at Pacific this past year. So he's going to he's young, of course, just having finished his NCAA career, but he certainly brings some size throughout the lineup in those, in the 3s and 4s. I think they've got some size too. So that's going to change things maybe a little bit from where they've been in the past. I mean, you and I have watched Jordan Baker coach for a few years now, and certainly a player that loves to, I'd say, think defense first. I think that's going to be an emphasis again this year. I mean, saw them working this week on just really trying to make sure that they're pressing the ball all over the floor, limit transition opportunities. I think they're going to use their size and length to support that a little bit as well. So that's the one thing that stands out. I'm not sure they have any what we might call pure and true scores. So I think the scoring side of things is going to have to come through how they play defensively, and it's going to have to be spread throughout the lineup. Not saying that's going to be a challenge. I think they've got players that can put the ball in the basket, but I think that maybe unlike what we've seen in the past with the Sean Easts of the world, or back in the day, the Xavier Moons of the world, where you've got a base of offense you can lean on. I don't know that they have that, but we've also seen, you and I have seen over the years too, where players come in and you don't know that they're going to be able to bring that kind of offensive level, and it elevates and kind of, I won't say comes out of nowhere, but it kind of does. So we'll see if that manifests itself too. But that's the one thing I think it could be, I'll call it a bit of a challenge, is where the true scoring is going to come from for this club.
They went deep into the G League this year, Doug, didn't they? To acquire a lot of their talent and a lot of the length that you're just describing. It seems like the G League is such an ideal match for the CEBL because, as opposed to playing overseas, which affect players like Hornsby and Nuga, and their season's not ending for a while, that going to the G League, whose season ends about 3 or 4 weeks ago, this is a great way to go, and the Stingers seem to really have bought into that this year.
Yeah, and we've seen that in the last couple of years. I think that's a great point, that we've seen a lot more G League connections with the CEBL over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and players coming in across the league. And for, I think, partly the reasons exactly that you state, it's a good opportunity for them to continue their seasons. They can play up here. it leads well into future G League seasons, or if they decide to go and play in Europe or Asia or elsewhere, they can do that. So Trey King, Dane Janth, I should say, are going to be two of the players that, again, bring some size to the group, 6'7", 6'8". So they're going to be those, threes and fours that can provide a little bit of a different dynamic, I think, to maybe what we saw last year with the Stingers. King put up about 9 points, 5 rebounds a game in his final year at Iowa State. Then last year with Austin in the G League, a little over 7 points a game, shot 39% from three. So a player that's going to, again, bring a little bit of outside presence and can, I think, be a player that can help bring the pace up a bit. Janth is, again, at 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range. Played at Illinois and Memphis in his NCAA career, so some prominent NCAA programs. And then last year was Sioux Falls in the G League, a little over 14 points a game, just under 6 rebounds a game. So, again, players that I think can probably be versatile, similar to the way we've seen Nick Hornsby be versatile in that lineup. And I think that's going to help the Stingers. And again, the fact that it's so tough, again, you spoke about it earlier on your show, the fact that, it's a week, maybe week and a half that these players have together to try to figure out how to get going. And you've coached, that's not an easy thing to do, to sort of throw players out on the floor. And they're all skilled players. You can't just sort of drop players out on the floor and say, go, and magically it's all going to click and work. And so I think having some players that are versatile, that bring some size, but can play some different roles, I think that's really important early in a season, because it allows you to kind of figure out your team a little bit and you're able to move guys in and out of spots maybe a little bit more easily. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But I think the versatility potential that exists in this lineup, I think, is a nice bonus early in the year for Coach Jordan Baker.
I'm talking with Doug McLean. He's the voice of the Edmonton Stingers on the CBC Gem broadcast for this year. He's also the voice of the University of Alberta Golden Bears and Pandas as well. And he joins us here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Doug, there's two, you mentioned the young man that played for Dave Smart. And for people who don't know who Dave Smart is, he's the greatest Canadian men's coach of all time, winning, I believe, 13 or 14 national championships at Carleton, and now is coaching at Pacific University down in California. And one of his bigs are here with the Stingers. There's also a young man from Indiana State who are coming right out of the NCAA. Now, we've seen over the years players come from very good NCAA programs, but the CEBL it's not the same as the NCAA, is it? And there really is a learning curve for a lot of these young guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And Savage Teal, the player that you're talking about, who played at Indiana State and then split his pro season this year between Israel and Finland. So has a little bit of pro experience, but to your point, not a lot. And
right.
I was talking to one of the Stingers assistant coaches this week, Eric Fawcett, and he talked about that. He said the fact that, to some degree, these players come in and it's not an easy jump. It's you sort of think, I'm going to come in. I played at the NCAA. I played at big schools. It's going to be no problem. You'll be able to step in and off we go. And that's not always the case. I mean, it's an elevated level of play. You've got older players, veteran players that have played professionally around the world. Some have played in the NBA, some have played in the G League. So there's lots of experience there. And I think it takes some time. I think a good example of that is a player we saw last year, the Stingers, who's now playing with Brampton, is in Keon Ambrose Hilton, a player that lots of size, had a good NCAA career. And I'm not putting words, I'm not saying he thought it was easy. I'm just using him as a good example of a player that it took him some time to figure it out. And he really had a strong second half of the year. And it just takes time to get into the swing of being a professional. And I heard when I was at practice this week, them talking about the fact that, guys, this is your job. This is a job now. It's different. It's, you're coming in, you're coming to work every day, and you got to understand what that means in terms of how you prepare during the morning, during the afternoon, coming to practice, what you're doing after practice, all those little things. And not to say they don't do that at the college level, but it's different. You're getting paid to do this now. So it's a very different world. Yeah, I know there's NIL money, but not for everybody. But, it's a different world now. And so I think that message is trying to get put into some of these players, because it's just not an easy jump to say, hey, now I'm from the NCAA. It's great great system, and now I'm going to play pro, and it's just going to be a next step up in what I do. But it's a learning curve for sure.
It's a learning curve, and it's exciting that Canada has a now well-established professional basketball league that have put its roots down. We're in the 8th year. We're going to get to a new owner that has bought into the league in a little bit. But let's talk about the opponents for the Stingers this afternoon. They're going to be playing against the Winnipeg Sea Bears. Winnipeg has one of the great organizations in the CEBL. I think that's pretty widely acclaimed, actually, that the Asper family that owns the Sea Bears has done a great job in Winnipeg. They have the largest crowds in Winnipeg. Now, one of the signings that Winnipeg made in the offseason, which I think was to the surprise of a lot of Stingers fans, was Xavier Moon, the great player for Edmonton that led Edmonton to their championships. So is Xavier with the team, or is he still playing overseas as well? Will he be in the roster today?
Yeah, my understanding is he won't play today, so he will not be in the lineup today. Not sure when he'll join the team.
Right.
And yeah, absolutely. I think it was a huge surprise. I mean, not only did Xavier Moon win 3 MVPs, win 2 titles with the Stingers, I mean, he was really in many ways the face of not just this franchise, but the league.
The league.
Player that went on to play with the LA Clippers, had some success with the Clippers in the stints that he had down there. Has been playing in Russia a little bit, and we've seen him. He's been back to Edmonton multiple times over the course of the last few years. And so there are great ties clearly between the franchise and him and the city and him. And so to see him go to Winnipeg, yeah, a bit of a surprise, and don't know all the backstory to how that came about. But I mean, regardless, if you look at the league as a whole, I think having him back in the league is a great thing. I think they might need 3 or 4 basketballs on the floor to navigate him and Teddy Allen and Davian Warren, another former Stinger that we saw a couple of years ago who liked the ball in his hands too. Isaiah Osborne, a former Stinger too, playing for Winnipeg. So that's going to be the most interesting thing, is how do you navigate that? Xavier Moon, a player that can certainly succeed and I think can enjoy being a distributor, but I don't think that's when he's at his best. I think he's at his best when the ball's in his hands. He's making decisions. Is he taking the ball himself, putting shots up? Is he getting the ball to his teammates? I don't know how that's going to work with Teddy Allen, so we'll see. But lots of good talent on that Winnipeg team. And to your point, I think they've definitely been, since they've come into the league, they've had great success on and off the floor. They haven't been able to quite get over the top. They hosted championship weekend last year, lost in a semifinal to Calgary. So they haven't quite gotten there yet, and they've got a lot of talent, but we all know you can put all the talent together. It doesn't mean you got a great roster, doesn't necessarily mean you have a great team. And we'll get a sense of that already today if that lineup can start to build to be one of the true contenders in the CBL this year.
Doug McLean talking with me. Doug is the voice of the Edmonton Stingers, also the Golden Bears and Pandas at the University of Alberta, here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Doug, what's the vibe that you're hearing about what could be the crowd today in the opening day for the Edmonton Stingers in the CEBL season?
Yeah, good question. I mean, not a ton of buzz, I wouldn't say, and it's hard to know if that's good or bad. I mean, we've seen, exactly. I mean, the crowds have been relatively consistent. The Stingers have done a good job with that. I know they had a season ticket holder event back earlier this week to thank and welcome their season ticket holder group to this year. And so I think, again, we know people love basketball in this community. The Stingers have been well supported. I think the fact that they've continued to try to do things over the off season in the community, be visible as best as possible, I think is a positive. So it might take a bit of time. Again, sort of word of mouth starts to ramp up a little bit once the season gets going and you continue to see the crowds go, but we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a good team. They've had good success here, new players. So that can be a bit challenging in terms of how you don't have the Sean Easts of the world coming back that you can lean on in terms of how you publicize your group, but they're going to be a fun team to watch. I think that goes without saying. And I think the crowd will be good today. And I think it'll continue to ramp up as the season goes on.
Couldn't agree with you more. I am curious to see, I'm going to shine a spotlight on Aaron Rooms because he has had consecutive phenomenal seasons in youth sports. And now with him graduating, a year older, a year wiser, with the experience behind him of, I think it's the last 2 seasons, correct? With the Stingers as a developmental player, last year as a full-time roster player?
That's right. Yeah, this will be his third year. Yeah.
So, I mean, what an advantage for a young man. I mean, we know Aaron has the body of a professional athlete, 6'6", big, strong, athletic guy. I'm really curious to see what his development will be like in terms of his ability to be a real impact player for the Stingers in their main rotation.
I completely agree. I think we saw him even 2 years ago in that first season that he was with the Stingers. There was a fair amount of confidence shown in Aaron Rooms. And I think they believed pretty early on in what he was able to do. And like you said, he's got, strong body, not the tallest, but he's got a good, strong center of gravity. I think allows him to do lots of different things. I think he's been a good shooter. He's one of the better shooters for the Stingers a year ago. And so that versatility inside and out is an advantage to him. I think the thing for him that I'm going to watch for is because, again, he's not going to be able to be a guy that can play a ton of minutes in the paint. He just doesn't have that kind of true size to be down there. But if he's a guy that can continue to work on his quickness and just add that little half step that's going to allow him to beat guys off the dribble, to get up the floor a little bit quicker, I think that's going to give him a real advantage because he has such a strong body. If you have to start matching up smaller players to deal with it a little bit more quickness, he's going to overpower them just because of the physical presence that I think he can bring. So I think he's a really important player for this group. Tay Donald, I think, is as well, another former U Sports player. So I think watching those two and how they continue to develop, and hey, good on the Stingers for identifying these guys and bringing them back and continue to see that development both in the offseason and how they develop with this club. And yeah, I think Rooms is a big, important part of this roster going forward.
The only University of Alberta player that I saw is they have one kid from the university, and I'm sorry I don't have my screen up right now. Is it Varner?
Kyle Varner.
Varner. Okay.
Kyle Varner's
talk about Varner's season with the Golden Bears and how you think his style of play and strengths and weaknesses will translate over to the Stingers.
I thought it was a tough year for Kyle Varner to some degree, especially the first half of the year. And it's not uncommon. We've seen that with players who have good first seasons. They come in and the second year is just a little bit tougher. Slump. And I think it's, and not to put myself in their heads, I think there's a sense of, okay, I'm going to elevate this year and I have a sense of what that's going to look like. And I think sometimes it just isn't as easy. You've got some film on players. You have a sense of what they can do, what their tendencies are, what they like. And I think for Varner, it was a bit of feast and famine, some really, really good nights, and then he'd kind of go quiet. And they just didn't have enough offensive depth for that to happen. They needed to lean on him. But I thought as the year went on, last quarter of the year, I thought he was much steadier. So night to night, Friday, Saturday, just much better, much more consistent. He has a great shot, incredibly quick release. Saw it even this week at practice. Like, he gets it off fast. And I think his teammates were a bit surprised even just how quickly they got to close on him to get out. Same thing, I think, similar to Rooms. I think maybe not, he doesn't have the same size as Rooms, but a player that if he can add a little bit more quickness to his game, I think he'll be a little bit more effective, because I think he's a guy that, plays, he can play not inside, but he can bring you down to the post a little bit, use the size he's got. If he adds a little bit more to his frame, I think that'll make a difference too. But a player that I think projects more to be certainly at this level, a 2, maybe a 3. And so with that, building a little bit more quickness, because he just, again, doesn't have the true size to be a guy that can go at bigger players all that easily. But that quick shot he's got, that's, you can't teach that. I mean, he just has it and he can knock him down, and he's got some confidence. You can see it this week even playing. I mean, he's not going to play a ton, I don't think, but might get some spot minutes here and there if he's in the lineup, and he's got some confidence, and having that little bit of that swagger can, but not an arrogant way, but I think he can bring that, and that'll serve him well too.
Well, and you need to have swagger. You need to have confidence, as we know, Doug, to be successful at this level when you're competing against athletes of this caliber. And it's great for a young man like this to get that experience, to go through the ups and downs of a professional experience, the knocks that you're going to take. You're only going to get better and stronger for it. And it's one of the nice, I think, smart parts of the CEBL, that it's dedicated to the development of Canadian athletes in this manner. Okay, so Doug, let's go to entertainment tonight. Mark Cuban is now an owner, and I have to be honest with you, Doug, when I saw the announcement, I go, that's got to be AI. It's like reading that, some celebrities died today, and you find out, well, that's not the truth. It's just some AI bot trying to get your attention. So I thought, Cuban, no way is this even possible. But it is. Mark Cuban is at least part owner of Brampton. And so tell me what your initial thoughts are about this highest of high-profile people with the pockets that are as deep as about you can get coming into the CEBL. It's going to be interesting because we've had other quote-unquote celebrity sightings where a lot of hype has been built around them and then it just kind of fizzles out. This feels a little bit different, at least initially out of the gate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's sort of early days on it. It's hard to know what it'll actually turn into. And Brampton, a team that made some aggressive moves over the offseason. We mentioned Ambrose Hilton and Sean East joining that team as well. And I think they're trying to build, a club that can attract top-end talent to play in the summer. And I think adding a part owner like Mark Cuban won't necessarily hurt that cause.
I don't think that'll hurt it.
No. Now, you have to be able to deliver, because, again, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to build this program, we want to be able to develop players that we want you to come in, play here, learn, and go on to top-end international teams, play in the G League, hey, maybe someday play in the NBA. Like, you make those promises, you got to find a way to deliver that and make sure that, yes, you're building a strong program that starts from the beginning and builds up. We'll see where they go. It's early days in CBL. And like we've been saying, with any team in this league, it's hard to know who's what and who's where and how it's going to play out. But they certainly made some investments on the player front this year. And, Cuban isn't going to hurt him. He's a guy that obviously turned to Dallas Mavericks franchise that was maybe, to put it nicely, not in the upper echelon of NBA franchises, once after they joined the league in the early 80s. And when he came in much later on, built them into a team that ultimately won an NBA title and I think became a team that did lots of good things on and off the court. And it's an interesting move. And I think it shows too where this league has gone. I think this league has drawn the attention of not just players, but other people in the basketball world. And that alone, I think, is good. How hands-on he'll be, I don't know. My sense of him and all his stuff is that he's tended to like to be hands-on. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. But I think it's a good message in terms of, I think, of where the league has gotten to. People now recognize this as a pretty viable, strong league in terms of the talent, in terms of what is producing. And again, you bring names like that in, that's a good thing. To me, it's got to be for the long haul. If he's in and then he's out again in a year, that's the worst kind of situation. So hopefully he's in for the long haul, because then you really start to see the message that this league is stable, this league is going somewhere, and then you start to attract players, investors, et cetera, who want to be part of it. So it's a good thing. It's just you want to see it last over some time.
I think you summarized it beautifully, Doug, because as you say, if this is another flash in the pan, in and out, it's not only not a positive, it's actually a negative, as you described very well. But it certainly gets feathers ruffled. It gets people's attention. We'll see if and when Cuban shows up for a game. I'm sure he will. It sounds like he's in, and it sounds like he has some pretty good relationships, and that the reason he invested is because of the relationships with past staffers at the Mavericks. So he's got relationships, and that means business and friendships that have drawn it to it. So it's definitely an out of the blue, unexpected addition to the CEBL this season. That's for sure. But coming back to the matter at hand, we've got the CEBL starting today here in Edmonton, the first national broadcast. Our good friend Mark Majot will be the sideline reporter on the CBC national broadcast. We're excited for Mark. And more than that, we're excited for the basketball fans in Edmonton to be able to go and watch professional basketball down at Hall D at the Edmonton Expo Center. And I believe it kicks off at 1:30. Correct, Doug?
I believe you are correct. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Doug McLean, it's been a pleasure having you on. Again, as always, thank you for your time. I wish you all success this year on the broadcast, and we'll have you back in real soon as the season gets going.
Happy to join anytime, and great to be on with you today. Have a good rest of the weekend.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Doug McLean, voice of the Edmonton Stingers, of the Pandas and Bears over at the University of Alberta, joining us here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to have part 2 of the deep dive with Ben Golliver here on your sports leader, Sports 1440.
They are, and to a large extent, I'm really happy for the Knicks because I think they have, and by they I mean the players. I think they've bought into this. I think they've been trying. I think they flailed away a bit under Tibbs. Glowering, I always love that term. I always say he looks like he's in a Dickens novel. You just have those big stovetop hats and a scarf and glower at people on a street corner. But I think Mike Brown has been really good for this team. And the fact that at times the way they went on that historic run of offensive productivity over 3 games, he's finding different things in them. But to be able then to have to, as you say, and you describe that so well, Ben, professionally finish that game, not allow the emotion of the moment let it get away from you like the Wolves almost did against the Spurs. That's hopeful, but now fingers crossed on OG and too often injured player that he is, because he has been playing the best, most impactful basketball of his career.
Yeah, I have him on that first team all playoffs too, I think Brunson's been great, especially here recently, but I thought OG was their best player against the Hawks and just a really tough matchup for them. Towns has been stepping forward. Everything's clicking for them offensively. I think they're feeling pretty good. And I would now probably put them as the new favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference. And I do think sometimes, the idea, if it's OKC versus New York, you don't want to look too far ahead, right? But it's like massive mega market versus the little, the little market, the little town on the prairie. I mean, they used to always do the Knicks versus Hicks thing with, the Pacers and that rivalry. Maybe that gets brought back up somehow. I'm not sure. But regardless, it would just be a fascinating contrast, right? Where like the Knicks kind of build their team through trading for Towns and signing, poaching Jalen Brunson and trading for Anunoby, and the Thunder are more a draft-oriented team. And, Sam Presti has been there forever. And then, they bring in Leon Rose, this hotshot agent, to run things. And, James Dolan's always making headlines, and the Thunder owner never even wants to accept the trophy. He just wants to hide in the background. It'd just be a very, very interesting finals matchup. I don't even know if either team's going to make it, but if they did, I think it would be a real study in contrast, 2 different ways to build a winner in the NBA.
So true. So true. I love the idea of that matchup, but I think San Antonio might have something to say about it. And again, I'm projecting ahead here as well. And so one final NBA question. Jaylen Brown has been the source of controversy with, some pretty, right term isn't shocking, but kind of odd criticism of the officials and conspiracy theory type of criticism. But the comment that really, I think, has stuck out to a lot of people is how this is the favorite season of his career, i.e., I was the guy. Yeah. So what do you think? Is that a signal that Jaylen wants his own team and that Brad and the Celtics should start thinking, you know what, maybe we have to look at the future without Jaylen Brown and see what we can get for this star player?
Well, first of all, on the officiating front, he had called it sort of like an agenda, where he was feeling like he was being targeted for using his off arm as a push off and getting called for the offensive foul. And he's saying, why are they doing this to me? Every star does this play. Right. I would say coming into playoff series or, playoff games or even the regular season, the idea of an agenda, it's not necessarily wrong. They have what's called points of emphasis, where the referees are trained to look for particular infractions. And if you see them, you've got to call them, right? Because this is something that the league office or the owners and the competition committee, everybody has just determined is in the better interest of the game. So is there a scenario where they had a point of emphasis and said, hey, watch those off-arm shoves because it's not fair to the defense and you got to call them? It's plausible. And I don't think it's a conspiracy theory out of nowhere from him But the very best players, the guys who can carry championship teams, right? And he should be one of those because he's won a Finals MVP in the past. They learn to adjust to the officiating, right? It's not, you're never going to complain your way to the way you want it to be. You've got to adjust and make different moves. And I think, unfortunately for him, he just is kind of a rudimentary ball handler and an attacker. And he's a physical player. He can score in a lot of different ways, but I wouldn't say he has the greatest dribble package I've ever seen. And so he was getting frustrated because he was getting called for the same thing, but he was doing the same thing wrong over and over and over. So of course they're going to call it. It's like there's a root cause here, and you could find it by looking in the mirror. It's not complicated. And so that's how I would say that, just to defend the officials and this idea of, hey, agendas. It's not a conspiracy. It's the idea of like, they're going to hold the line on certain things they have for years and years and years, and they're very transparent about it. I've sat in Zoom calls with the heads of officiating who say these are the kinds of plays, whether it's sliding under a shooter with your feet or, whether it's a shooter stopping short and jumping into a defensive player to get the call, that they're trying to remove from the game. And so if they see it, they're going to call it. And so that was just that point on the officiating. In terms of
I'm just going to inject in here. Then the devil's advocate is going to say, well, then why don't they call it on SGA?
Right.
Because he does the same thing. And, like missing a couple of the goaltends, and I don't agree with Finch that 8 of the 12 were goaltends, but 2 to 3 were. I mean, they were off glass, and it seemed like the officials were caught up in the moment. Hopefully, I'm sure they've had conversations since then. But the one thing I would say about SGA is I am surprised at the number of times that they don't call the forearm shiver that he uses, because it does come out. And maybe it's just the angle. I don't look at it as a conspiracy theory item at all. Yeah. But for whatever reason, some players in real time are just far, far better. And I think a big part of that point that you made about rudimentary handle that Brown has, Shea has a much more sophisticated handle. And it's a much tighter handle, where Brown, a lot of his plays are out in front of him and his forearm contact is way out in front of him, where SGA is more close to the body. So, but there's your double advocate's point. Is there any validity to it?
Oh, of course. I that's sort of what Jaylen Brown is saying, right? I think that not only does Shea have the better handle, I think he's more subtle, and I think he's also more in control. And so some of the times when you're doing the shove and you're kind of wildly driving, it just makes it easier on the officials. Shea, it's like he's a ballerina out there. He's dancing and dancing and dancing, and you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And the other thing, just, the other counter that I think the refs would make, the same ref is not standing in the same spot to make the same call against Shea as the guy who made the call against Jaylen, right? There's a lot of different variables, and the NBA tries to standardize this stuff as much as possible. I mean, they review the tape with the referees just an ungodly amount to try to make sure that it is a fair thing across all the different referees and for every different player. But it's people will point to examples of Shea getting away with it, and I'm sure if you go back to the tape, you'll find examples of Jaylen getting away with it, right? And so I do think that Shea gets a pretty good whistle as far as Stars are concerned. I don't think it's as big of a crime against the sport as a lot of people on social media like to scream that it is. But I think if they were to just start calling it every time, Shea would adjust within 6 minutes of gameplay. He would not do it again, and it's the same thing. People say, he flops, he sells calls. Well, if he wasn't going to get the calls, he's not going to try to do it again, because that would be a fool's errand and he'd be costing his team. Right. And certainly Shea will not be going on Twitch to argue about it and get fined 3 days later. It's just never going to happen. And so I do think one of the things that everybody could take from the Thunder, and we didn't mention this about that Lakers game the other night, the Lakers are huddled around the referee, pleading their case at the end of the buzzer. 9 Lakers guys standing around these referees. Referees are, they're going to just view that in general as a sign of disrespect or a lack of respect. And maybe there is respectful communication going on in that. But the idea that it's going to become this huge story, the referees are against us, in the long run, that's going to work against you. What did Mark Daigneault say after the game? He said, well, I had some issues with the referees during game 2 as well, but that's going to stay between me and them on the court. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. And if you handle things that way, I think you're better off in the long run. I understand Stars are going to work the officials because they want the calls. And going back to Michael Jordan's day, they would always say, he's got the refs in his back pocket, and there's an art to it. But I think the more you complain, the more harm you do to yourself.
Great points. And Jordan was really good at the way he worked the officials, because he didn't talk to them much, but I'm sure what he said was very impactful. And he did get some calls. Just ask Brian Russell whether he got any calls or not. But and by the way, do people get upset on social media about things, Ben?
Every once in a while, yeah. Every once in a while. Yeah, I'm here to break the news to you.
So Jaylen Brown, will he be in Boston next year?
I think so, but it was an interesting comment about this being his most fun season because they had such a great season winning the championship just a couple years ago. He kind of walked things back. Brad kind of cleaned it up, so it doesn't feel like it's necessarily imminent. But I think Boston faces some real questions in terms of how do you retool around Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, given that their entire front line got exposed in the playoffs. And a lot of their supporting cast guys like Derek White maybe is starting to get a little bit older, wasn't quite as effective. And Peyton Pritchard's just small. And so he can be a very helpful piece, but he's not going to be a part of your core championship piece. And so is there a scenario where the best path for Boston to win another title is to trade Jaylen Brown? I would say yes. And I see people floating like Jaylen Brown and Giannis trade scenarios. Makes a lot of sense to me. That's the kind of trade if I'm Boston where it's like, that kind of raises my ceiling. It helps fill my front court need. We still have star power. Let's try it out. Maybe Jaylen can go somewhere else. I've seen Atlanta thrown out there and have his own team and, because he's from Georgia. That might make sense for him as well. I'm not sure, but I do think even though it's not maybe imminent, he kind of put everything on the clock here with these comments, right? It's like, hey, we're starting to plant some seeds here, so put out some breadcrumbs, and maybe it's going to wind up being a divorce in a year or two.
Well, it was definitely Jaylen's moment. He certainly became much more outspoken than I've ever seen him before. But I have to admit, I kind of enjoyed it, to be honest, because he was griping in a way that cost him a lot of money, but to us, normal folk, that seems like a lot of money. But on the other hand, he was just speaking out of what he perceived to be the situation. And then this other comment, maybe it was offhanded, maybe it was a signal, but it certainly adds to the flavor of the off season. Ben, thank you so much for today. This has been so much fun as always. And it's going to be a great weekend and a great week of playoff basketball. I hope when we can talk again, if we can talk again next week, we're going to have some series that'll be settled, and we're going to have a real clear look on what's going to be happening for the conference finals. So exciting days ahead in the NBA.
Oh, I share the hope. It's a great time of year. We're getting closer and closer to that Larry O'Brien trophy. You can almost taste it. So I look forward to chatting.
Thanks so much to Ben Golliver for joining me here on Hoop City with Paul Sir on the Deep Dive.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, Josh. I mean, we just went through 5 songs, and they're all just fantastic.
It really doesn't get much better than September, however. That's like the most famous graduation song of all time.
Absolutely.
Next to Pomp and Circumstance. So,
and I'll take September any day of the week. I remember the first time I heard Earth, Wind, and Fire. I was living off campus when I was going to Winona State University, and one of my teammates lived in one of the rooms upstairs, and his name was Jerry Williams, and he was from El Paso, Texas. And Jerry was this really good-looking guy, and the first person that would tell you that would be Jerry. He loved his nickname called the Stroker, and he was a character. But he said, Paul, you got to come upstairs. You got to hear this. And he played Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire, and he had a very, very good stereo setup. And I thought, man, oh, man, it's one of those times. It's like the first time you hear something and it's groundbreaking. And I thought, this is something special. And then, of course, Earth, Wind, and Fire went on not just to have a great musical run themselves, but also to influence so much of the funk, soul, Motown musical genre. And the music all these years later, 50 years later, still stands up so well. So Earth, Wind, and Fire, anytime you get a chance in September, that's really top of the food chain. Lots going on in basketball this weekend. Game going on right now. You can flip it on. You see Dallas playing Indiana in the WNBA. We talked about that earlier. Caitlin Clark against Paige Beckers. They're going toe-to-toe, very close game. As the season opens, we have the Toronto Tempo losing last night to Washington, but a great start. The Tempo have put together a nice-looking team. Their coach is very, very good. So I think we're in for great WNBA basketball throughout the season in Canada and across the league. We also, though, have two great matchups today as well. Detroit up 2-0 in the series over the Cleveland Cavaliers. Go to Cleveland. And Josh, if Cleveland plays in the similar way to how they played against the Raptors, they're going to be a much better team at home because they won all 4 of their games against the Raptors. But this is the Detroit Pistons, not the Toronto Raptors. What's your feeling on this game this afternoon?
Yeah. I really don't like what I've seen from Cleveland this series. I don't like what I've seen from their guards, specifically James Harden. I mean, Donovan Mitchell has not been good either, but James Harden has more games with turnovers than made field goals.
Dreadful.
This postseason. So that's not good. What I really want to see from the Cavs, though, is something that really helped them against the Raptors, which was their bigs really getting into the game. Because I love Jalen Duren, but I think Evan Mobley has like 4 inches on him. So use that height to your advantage a little bit. Same with Jared Allen, who was like the absolute MVP of that Game 7 against the Raptors as well. Created like 4 possessions by himself. So their bigs really need to get involved in the game. And they need to really focus their whole team defense on stopping Cade Cunningham.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I agree with you about the bigs getting involved, but that also, the domino effect comes down to the guards have to be better in order to get the bigs involved because the bigs are dependent on the guards to get the ball in scoring positions. Mobley has a little bit more versatility to his game, but he's still not what you would call an upper echelon scorer in terms of being able to create his own shot. He's better than he has ever been as the reigning defensive player of the year until Wembanyama recently was unanimously picked as the defensive player of the year this year. So Mobley has to do more individually, but ultimately Harden at his age, and Ben Golliver and I talked about that. I mean, the guy's 37 years old, and he's not LeBron James physically. So he's not able to keep Father Time at bay the way LeBron has been. And he's still a very good player, but he takes way too many chances dribbling into traffic, looking to bait the defender into a foul, and he just hasn't been successful against a very good defensive team in Detroit. To your point about Cade Cunningham, the thing I like about Cunningham is, yes, if you focus on him and you're running 2 players at him, he will get rid of the ball, and then you can see whether other players on Detroit are capable of taking the game over and making more plays. It will be interesting to see how Cleveland adjusts to try to take some of Cunningham's magnificent game, and he's such a smart player. He lets the game come to him, so it's going to be interesting to see how those 2 forces collide and who's going to be able to come out on top. Yep. Now, here's my question in terms of prediction, though. Do you think Cleveland can take one today?
No. Honestly, I've got a pretty strong sense that basically all of these series except for the Timberwolves one is over. I think the die is cast. If anything, I think it'll be a poor showing from Cleveland this afternoon, and then on Monday, they'll actually show up big time.
Okay. I'm going to go with Cleveland winning today and losing on Monday, but I think you make a valid point. It's one of the things that's always interesting about when you get into the playoffs is what translates from one game, i.e., let's just use the Timberwolves as an example in that horrific Game 2 effort where they didn't even show up with any kind of serious intent to compete, to a much better Game 3. And now the pressure's on for them to have to be able to up their game into Game 4 to keep this series from getting completely out of hand with San Antonio. I'm going to go with Cleveland. The other NBA game today are having the OKC Thunder for the second game in Los Angeles. What's your pick today? Is this just going to be a Thunder? Is this just a fait accompli, maybe more so than any of the other series, that this is Game 4, it's going to be over, LA head to the golf course after today?
Give me the brooms. Give me the brooms.
Absolutely. Start getting your crew assembled to take the floor apart.
Exactly. And I think Lakers fans have the same feeling. I'm just sitting here on ESPN currently, and if you look at the schedule, it will give you ticket prices as low as the lowest ticket price you can find currently for the Lakers game is $23.
Is that right?
Per ESPN.
Oh my goodness. So you can go to a Lakers game today for $23.
Yeah, it's probably standing room only, obviously, but
well, maybe not.
It's still this is the Lakers we're talking about here.
Yeah, but you're also talking about LA fans. And they're a fickle group.
So what the hell, Los Angeles?
So you're saying the Stars aren't going to be coming out today?
I guess so. They might be sitting courtside, but maybe the Stars are more enthralled with New York and the Knicks right now.
Oh, for sure. You're going to see everybody sitting courtside for the Knicks game. They're definitely one of the darlings. So, okay, so you're going with OKC.
Give me OKC.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I think, in our conversation with Ben, talking about the OKC hasn't had the best out of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Is sort of just a different look for Shai because he's been invincible literally all season long. To be a little bit less than perfect because his game is as close to perfection in the regular season as anybody has been probably since Michael Jordan was in the league. So I think it's pretty safe to say LA, I think they've tried really hard. They don't have the talent. Without Luka around, they'd be hard-pressed to win one or two with Luka around, I think, against this very, very good and very, very deep Thunder team. So I think we're both in agreement that this is going to be the first sweep that we're going to see and the first series that will be ending for the NBA season. So I just got a text from our good friend Joey Slattery out of Winnipeg. Joey, of course, does a tremendous job in a variety of media capacities out in Winnipeg. He also does play-by-play for the Winnipeg Sea Bears. He's listening to the show today, and he just sent me a text saying that Xavier Moon is out. He's entering the semifinal with his Russian team in Zenit in Russia, and he probably won't be here until mid to late June. Isaiah Osborne, who's played for the Stingers, is also out. And Teddy Allen, who scores a lot of points but gets a lot of criticism for being a volume player, seems to have been much more of a team guy coming into training camp. So we're going to see, is this a new Teddy Allen today when he takes the court against the Edmonton Stingers? Or are we going to see Teddy who can take a game over? And by the way, I say that with Teddy, not necessarily all in a derogatory way at all, because Teddy Allen is one of the great scorers that we've ever had in the CEBL. And whenever he's on the court, he's a danger because he can really fill it up quickly. But it makes for great drama as the two teams take the court without some of their stars, without some of their players, but we know that's the deal in the CEBL. I'm going to wrap up today by just a couple of things just to take care of business. You can listen to the entire show on our podcast after the show is over. Also, we're going to break out today our interviews and segments with Pat Boylan, and you can also listen to the deep dive in its entirety in my conversation with Ben Golliver. So you can go on YouTube or you can go on Spotify or whichever podcast provider of your choice and listen to the show again if you weren't able to keep it, or if you weren't able to fit it into your schedule so far today. Also, I do put out a 3-in-1 blog every week. I think there's some pretty good content in that. And if you want that in your email, please text the show and we'll get it out to you next week. I think we're on volume 21 of that. Mm-hmm. We get to the final part of the show today, and I want to take a moment because May is the Mental Health Month, as we know. And the NBA, WNBA, most sports organizations spend a great amount of time talking about mental health. And they also, and I hear this more and more often by media personalities about being kind to one another. And every week, for anyone who listens to our show, knows that at this part of the show, I talk about my son, Ben, who passed away 3 years ago. And Ben battled mental health and addiction issues. And Ben suffered terribly. But also one of the things that Ben is remembered for is how kind he was to his fellow human beings. And people that were in the toughest spots in life, Ben was the kindest too. And I want to encourage you to think the best of other people at all times. If people we don't know what folks are going through in their personal lives. And sometimes when they're acting out and they're having a really difficult time in life, that's the time to be the kindest to them. You can never be too kind. And also a reminder to everybody, for those that are in your life that you love, that mean a lot to you, make sure you tell them that, because our journey here is short. And the people that are special, that make life worthwhile, that make life rich, you got to let them know. And kindness always comes back. It always comes around. So think the best of each other. Be kind to each other. Josh, fantastic show today. Fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Always happy to do it, Paul. Looking forward to the next time we get to do it together in 2 weeks.
100%. You're off next week.
Yeah.
Chasing around the province of Alberta, but we'll be back with you next weekend on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Thanks so much for spending your time with us today. As I mentioned, you can listen to our podcast if you want on your podcast provider. In the meanwhile, have a great weekend on and off the court. Enjoy hoops action. Enjoy the spring weather. Thanks so much for spending your time here on Hoop City with Paul Sir, Josh Fenwick, on your sports leader, Sports 1440.